Live on WFLA Now. Feel good and live your best life with Bloom Health Club. Here's Gayle Guyardo.
Welcome to Bloom Health Club. I'm Gayle Guyardo alongside digital reporter and producer Brody Wooddell. Together, we're taking a deeper dive with some of the amazing guests that we have on Bloom, headquartered on WFLA News Channel 8, the NBC affiliate in Tampa, Florida. We are broadcast globally, but we're super excited now about this digital platform. And because we're going to be able to take a deeper dive with great guests like the Dr. Simone Alisha, the Self-Esteem Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us. I love having you on Bloom, and I'm so excited that we can take a deeper dive.
Oh my goodness, this is what I've been waiting for. Let's go.
And Brody, you gotta love this too. I mean, the Self-Esteem Doctor. I think all of us along our road in life need a little boost in self-esteem.
Yes, I think so too. And I'm very excited to hear what you have to say and get some tips.
Oh yeah, tips are coming.
Yeah, so earlier on Bloom, you talked to us about getting outside our comfort zones. And I want to talk about that because at every stage of our lives, whether we're young, we're changing careers, we're hitting our next phase in life, it's difficult. But I want to talk about you first. I want to talk about how you became the Self-Esteem Doctor.
Oh, I love that. And it really involves stepping out of my comfort zone. So I started off as an elementary school teacher, and I saw that self-esteem was this recurring topic. It was just kids asking me if they were fat at age 8, and people are not thinking they can pass tests and they're not smart enough. And I was like, someone's got to work on self-esteem. And then there was a second phase of life I was going through at the same time where I was modeling. And backstage, I would hear the models also, oh, I'm this, I'm that, just criticizing and tearing themselves apart. And I'm like, someone's got to work on self-esteem. And I remember this one crucial day, I stepped off stage and a bunch of little girls were like, you're perfect and we love you. And I was like, no, you should have heard what we were saying back there. No, don't, someone's got to teach. I'm like, oh, okay, I see a theme here. It's going to be me and I'm going to teach self-esteem. So that's how it started.
I love it. I love it. And you think I look back at my career, and if you met me as a little girl, Dr. Simone, you would be like, how did she ever make it to where she is today? I was a wallflower, not the most attractive little kid on the planet, but I had a mom that was always trying to find ways to build my self-esteem, which I thought was so cool. And Brody, you and I have talked about this. I mean, you've been in the television industry and you're doing this incredible gig now. And you said growing up, you didn't always have self-esteem. So it's not just a girl issue.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's something that you have to build over time. And it's interesting to me that you said that thing about the modeling and things of that nature, because I know models and actresses and dancers and stuff like that. And it seems like some of the most high achieving, most perfect put together people are some of the most harshest critics of themselves. So I almost wonder to ask you, is that part of how they get to that level, or is that just a result of pressure, or what's up with that?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually think it's a bit of both. I think being able to put a little pressure on yourself, a little fire behind you kind of can be what propels you forward. But ultimately, I think it's being in that place and then you become hypercritical and then it becomes part of the territory we think, because what we think others want of us, and am I living up? And again, that language in the mind starts to change and you become really critical and doubting yourself and just overcompensating in some cases. And the self-esteem becomes a really big challenge.
Yeah, and especially now, because you think about it, I did not grow up with social media. Sure, I grew up with TV and magazines, but social media was not a thing when I was growing up. But I look at my daughters, and it's such a huge impact, not just by what you're seeing, but by what you're hearing from others. Because, I've been in an industry where people can jump on Twitter, or back in the day, they'd get on an email and tell you what they think about you. And for me, my shell has never thickened up to that. I'm still very thin-skinned. And I think no matter what your age, you're going to worry about what other people are thinking about you. And that can really destroy your self-esteem.
100%. I think there's a combination of things to think about here. So number one, growing up in our whole lives in school, it's all about being assessed to a certain degree. Did you get an A? Are you performing to the standards? Are you developing at the right rate? So we're constantly being compared and having to assess ourselves. So I think that's part of it. And then secondarily, with social media, I think what we haven't done is to implement more of the tools that we need to combat that. We entered a new era of, and now I can tell you how I feel any time of day, morning, noon, or night, in and out of school, middle of the night. And I I don't think we've created enough of, tools and resources. So now how do you deal with this new thing that's here? And I think finally this is kind of the work I'm trying to do. Like, how do we help you?
So how do you help people?
All right. So once I learned that whatever's going on in your mind is really a program, it's a matter of just like you do, programming a computer or an app or a game. It's a set of programmed beliefs and thoughts that are happening that make you see the world the way you do. And once I realized that you can kind of get into someone's head and help them with very specific tools, very specific visualizations, habits, expose them to different resources, that you can actually create a different program. And the biggest obstacle I've seen to that is people not knowing that that was a thing. Interesting. Yeah. And then once you know it's a thing, you're like, okay, well then how do I do it? And I'm like, that's the question. So let's do that.
Oh, wait, we're looking at you swimming around in a pool. And, our promised topic today is getting outside your comfort zone. What is going on here?
Okay, so I had to take the plunge myself. I'm going to confess, with all the self-esteem work I do, and my self-esteem is pretty good, I am not an adventurous person. So I am not the one to be like, oh, look, lake, let's jump in it. I'm more like, what's in there? Let's stay out. Right. But this is a trip to Jamaica at Martha Brae. We went river rafting with my family. And all of a sudden I look up, my daughter's standing on this rock, getting ready to swing off. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to do it too, right? So again, the program, I'm like, I've got this. It's safe. I can do this. Let's go. And I hopped up there, grabbed that rope, and swung off into.
How did that feel?
It actually was pretty amazing. I just surrendered that sense of fear for that moment and was like, you know what? Let's have some fun. Let's live a little. And let me just follow whatever the instructions are. And if you look closely, you will see that I actually slipped. I did not let go.
Look at you.
Yeah, you did. Huh?
That was me falling off. Yeah.
I love it. Brody, are you an adventure guy? Do you get out there and take the risks?
I try to be. I do. I try to be a lot more spontaneous and try new things, and it's kind of paid off a lot of the times that I do it. And even if something goes bad, it's like it was worth it to have tried that out, and now you had an experience.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I ended up living in Mexico for like 8 months because I just decided on a whim to go with somebody. They invited me. I knew this person for like 2 months. They're like, "You want to go to Mexico?" I was like, and then
I really do that while you're young, right, Dr. Simone?
I really thought about it, and I was like, I guess, why not?
Why not? Yeah.
I
mean, it reminds me of my story of how I got married. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm never getting married. 2 months after meeting my husband, I'm like, sure, let's get married.
You're like, I could do this. Yes, exactly.
And I love it. I get to meet your husband behind the scenes when you come in to do the show, and then you guys have a great life together.
Oh, yeah. By the way, it was 14 years ago I made that little spontaneous decision.
Oh, nice.
And how many kids? How many kids later?
2 kids later,
Wow.
14 years. So I'm like, all right, sometimes taking a chance works. Doesn't
And
it?
you have daughters as well, too.
Yeah, I have a daughter and I have a son.
Okay.
Yeah. So teaching them to, face life. It's just, there's so many different elements of it. There's the physical adventure of like, okay, going to Mexico, jumping off a ledge. And then there's that emotional stuff, that mental, emotional space where the self-esteem really seems to have a more negative impact if you're not, working on that and building that. And I think it's a lifelong thing. And I think that's what most of us are missing. We're like, I'm going to go to one good seminar and just be like, transformed, which can happen, but you got to feed that, right?
Yeah, you got to feed the beast.
Oh yeah, I'm like, it's like Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone has Thanksgiving. You're like, I'll never eat again, right? I'm so full. And then by that night, you're like, was there more apple pie?
Yeah, exactly.
I can have a little bite, right? It's the same thing. You go to some awesome seminar, you get really full. You're like, oh my gosh, I get it. I'm empowered. This is my life. And then a week later, you're like, oh my gosh, what happened to that? I forgot. You had to keep feeding it. You're going to have to keep feeding that.
So you say when it comes to self-esteem, when it comes to getting out of the fear factor, when it comes to trying new things in life, it's something that we need to nurture, much like going to the gym.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love to say to people, I'm like, have you ever gone to the gym, just picked up a 900-pound weight and you just had muscles? And they're like, no, that's ridiculous. I'm like, exactly.
Right.
So the same thing when it comes to the mental, emotional stuff and the self-esteem. You read one good book, you feel really empowered, but like, that's not it. It's a lifelong journey. Mostly because, as you said before, there's social media. There are all these different things that are coming at us that we have to keep building that strength to manage day to day, work, school, life, friendships, everything.
Brody, you're up here in the streaming center where there's a lot of breaking news. I mean, it's easy for people to get into a negative zone because there's just so much negativity around us that it almost creates a fear factor.
Yes, it does. There's like a lot going on, and it seems like the more there is to worry about or the more that's going on, even if it doesn't directly affect you, like that anxiety and like those issues come around to you. And, it goes back to the whole saying of being like a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond. There's going to be those issues there, and it's like you gotta have to fill your cup.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's balance. I feel like we always want to put things in a box. I'm so against this box that we're trying to put things in. There's not a box, yes, you should be aware of what's happening in the world. And sometimes that's bad news. That's life. That's real. But there's also really great things that we can focus on. Also, that's life and that's real. And I think we've just had this really off balance experience where we're like, keep it real. This is bad. This is how life is. And you're like, okay, yeah, I'm keeping it real, but life's also pretty good. I'm gonna just acknowledge that too, right?
Yeah.
And if we work on that balance, I think we have to know that we're allowed to have that balance. Like, I think some people feel guilty. Like, I'm too happy. The world's falling apart and I'm too happy. Like, what's wrong with me? It's like, we got to pour some of that happiness into the world so that we can help,
Share it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Here's something that you and I have talked about mostly off camera. I think we touched on it maybe very slightly during one of our segments on Bloom, the television version. And that is your thoughts on spirituality, faith. This is an interesting topic because some people are totally closed off to it. Others can't get enough of it. But where does it fit in your life?
Oh my gosh, it's everything. It's the foundation of everything. And because I've worked with so many different people, so many different age groups, so many different belief systems, what it's allowed me to do is to expand my own view of that. Like, how do I define spirituality? And how do I speak to someone who says there's no such thing or whatnot? And what I found is, specifically with the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, bridging this gap between science and spirituality and starting to back things with proof and look at energy and look at the atoms and really making it real, this tangible concept of something bigger. And whatever you want to call it, I totally respect that. Ultimately, I think that something bigger is at play and can really help to navigate and make life just feel so much more full, and the hope and the positivity and the possibility. And I think that's what we can call faith,
So when you talk to these experts that show you the science and you take this deeper dive, what are you learning when it comes to how to apply it to your life? Because again, I don't want to I'm not here to preach. Everyone who's listening should have their opinion, and that's so important. So I'm not trying to preach, but I do share, I align myself with you on this. I'm big into faith. I'm big into spirituality. I've seen it in my life in ways that you can't explain it any other way. I think until it happens to you, really happens to you in a way that you can't argue, that's when you become a true believer in it. And then as soon as you open your eyes to it, you keep seeing it. It comes to you again and again and again and again. And why is that? What are the experts telling you?
Oh, the evidence is going to keep presenting itself because we're aligned to it. And this could be an hour-long show just on this part because it's so good. But ultimately, I really feel that once you have an understanding of how the energies are working and the divine space or the science space, whichever one you want to look at, that there is this bigger thing and it's interconnected in a way that you can feel, you can see, you can measure, you can sense, you can know. I think it's like a sixth sense, not like psychically sixth sense, but there's this knowing sometimes. We call it the gut feeling, we call it the instinct. And ultimately, I think it all revolves around that higher power and that higher self. And what I have learned is to apply it every single day in my life by tapping in by meditation, listening to what's that inner voice telling me, what's my gut telling me, what are the dreams, what's fueling me, what feels really good, right? And when we trust that, we see results in our lives. And it depends on who you're talking to. You talk to a big business executive and they're like, I follow my instincts on these things. You're like, ooh, you got instincts, right? You talk to someone who's spiritual and they're like, I follow the voice. And you're like, oh my God, the voice, right? So it just depends on how you language it in a way that feels safe and receptive to someone. But ultimately, there's this inner knowing that comes over every single one of us at some point in our life on some topic. And we either follow it and see this great result or we don't. And we're like, man, I should have listened, right?
What do you think, Brody? Where do you fall on this? I've never asked you. We're kind of new working together.
You mean the spirituality conversation?
Yeah.
I certainly believe in something being there. There seems to be as sort of hippie and earthy as it is to say an energy or a vibes between people. There's sometimes you just connect with certain people or certain aspects or activities even, and it just seems to make sense. And I believe what you said, it's there's so many good aspects that come with spirituality as well. Especially the community and belonging and already sort of having this list of things okay, because of this, that we're both branding ourselves this thing, I already know we have this, and this in common, or we already agree on these things. And so that seems to really help facilitate friendships, conversations, and I think there's a lot of power to that.
And Brody touched on this when he said the energy. I mean, there is something to our energy because we are,
let's
Bowls of energy.
It literally is measurable. We
Yeah.
are literally resonating at a frequency. So if you want to use the word frequency instead of energy, then people are a little more receptive. Or the wavelength, right? We see the color spectrum is on a wavelength, sounds on a wavelength. We're on a wavelength. We're part of it. I just ultimately think that we have more in common than we do different, and we have more growth and power that we can share rather than compete for. I think that when we work together and collaborate, we win, and I think we've been trained differently, that this is a dog eat dog, and it's like, by the way, have anyone seen a dog eat a dog? I've never seen that, because what? But anyway,
What does that mean?
what does that even mean, right? But at the end of the day, we're looking at this sense of working together, empowering each other from a place of understanding that there is a greatness within me. So when I talk about self-esteem, it's funny, we're talking about spirituality, because I talk about the true self. Like, a lot of times where I'm coming from is the true self, which is that true divine self. So when I say I am, it's kind of biblical sometimes, that there's a deeper I am, right? But we can apply it to the physical body. We can interchange it with each other. And that stigma that if I love myself too much, I'm mean to others, is nonsense. Because when I really love and respect myself, I want nothing more than to share that. I want to see you on that pedestal right there with me. I want us to all win. And that's a genuine sense of self-love, self-esteem, and spirituality, ultimately.
I'm so glad too that you said true self, because I think that's a lot of that can stand in the way of someone's success, their self-esteem. You really need to put yourself out there, regardless of what it is, whether it's your brand, whether it's your business. Who really are you and what do you stand for? Because I think people will resonate with authenticity. And when they resonate, that's when you start building that self-esteem and you can start making strides in life.
100%. And that's literally when you feed that. So I remember when I first became the Self-Esteem Doctor, I had two separate incidences. One, someone said to me, so what's a self-esteem doctor? I'm like, I don't know. I'm still creating her. I'm still building this. I don't know exactly what it is just yet. And then I also remember my dad saying to me, don't you want to just go into traditional psychology, like just really traditional? I'm like, no, I want to study neurolinguistic programming and spirituality and blend them with my background in education. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know yet, but I am building it. And I had to have this just laser focus on doing the thing that I felt I was called to do, even when I couldn't quite explain it. So to your point, Gayle, putting yourself out there, like, I just had to take that step. And it makes me interested to know, how did you go from wallflower, to putting yourself out there? I'm curious.
I would have to give my late mom 110% credit. She was not a self-esteem doctor, but back in the day, she would teach young girls and boys etiquette. And then that evolved into, she went from like this kind of traditional 1960s etiquette thing into helping people grow. And I think when God brought me into her life, he's like, here's your biggest project ever. And
she nailed it.
There you go. And she nailed it. And a lot of it too was just teaching me how to step out on that limb, because a lot of times you need that coach, which is why I admire what you do, because she was a coach to tens of thousands of young people and adults, but mostly youth. And I think along the way, we have coaches in baseball, football, wrestling, whatever your sport is, but nobody really coaches us through life when it comes to self-esteem, getting out of that negative playbook that goes on. And that happens to me. I have to reverse my lens daily. Yes. I have to constantly say, stop it, Gayle. Stop with the voices in your head. Stop with the beating yourself down. Stop with the self-criticism. These are the things that hold you back in life from really living your best life.
100%. I think that's the fallacy. I think people think once you've nailed it, you'll never have a negative thought or you'll never doubt yourself. It's going to be constant, especially as you're growing. There's going to be more and more potential for, I want to do this new thing. Well, can I do that new thing? Okay, now I believe in myself, but now I want to do that new thing. Can I do that new thing, right? So ongoing doubt or questions. And I think there's a perception, especially in our young people today, that if I have 1 ounce of doubt or unease or uncertainty, then I'm obviously like, I can't do this. I'm not meant for it. And I'm like, no, what we need is the tool to overcome that. You are coaching yourself. When you talk yourself through that, that is coaching yourself. And that's the tool. Those are the tools that we need. And I think it's absolutely amazing that you brought that up and that you use it. And that's the coaching element for everyone.
Yeah, the coaching. But you help people do this. You're a trained doctor in this. for the rest of us, it's a lot of trial and error. But that's what I love it when you come on Bloom. And that's why I'm so glad that you could be here for Bloom Health Club, because I think people need to listen to this more, because a lot of people feel very alone in their darkness. But you should know. I mean, it touches everyone's life. It's very few people that can say that that darkness doesn't seep in. It's just controlling it and ushering it out that's so critical.
For sure. And if someone does say, you know, I don't have this darkness, that's okay. Their perception of it just might be different. Some people might have that and they call it a challenge instead of calling it darkness, or they call it like my next obstacle. We verbalize things in a way that will help us to be empowered, or we verbalize in a way that's going to hold us back. So for the people who've mastered that language, like, good for you. I don't need to compare myself and be like, well, I have darkness and you don't have darkness, right? Like, whatever you got, that's fine. I'm working through mine, right?
Right.
And I think that's such an important point. And I love the fact that you use the word coach, because when I start working with the younger kids and the parents are like, how do I get him to talk to you? I'm like, tell him I'm a coach. Don't say therapist. And that's, you know, and then they're like, okay, I can do that. And then I find out what they love or like. And then we use that analogy. Like, so do you like dancing? Do you like football? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm a coach. Like, Kobe Bryant had a coach and I'm like a coach, you know, and kind of give them that representation. It's like, you don't have to be bad or something is wrong with you to have a coach or to be coached through something. So I think opening that door helps people a lot.
Yeah, that's good. We love to leave people with actionable steps. It's something that you do on Bloom. It's something I want you to do on the Bloom Health Club. You talk about these tools. Are there any tools that you can share with our people watching and listening today?
Absolutely. Okay. So before I leave you my final tool, I want to share that one of the things that's important to me is to make sure everyone has access to these tools 24/7. So I just want to thank you guys so much for having me on, because it's like, I feel like I'm in my classroom when I'm here. I'm like, it's time to teach on Bloom. Let's go. Right. Yeah. So I'm happy to bring this to you. And I also have my academy online where you guys can go and get all these free resources to keep learning no matter where you are on the globe. And one of the things I would love to tell you guys is the power of affirmations. I know we hear it so much and it's sometimes a little bit played out like, oh my gosh, another affirmation, please stop. But I want to give you a little trick about affirmations. It is really about activating the way that you're feeling. We talked earlier about wavelengths and frequency and energy. When your thoughts match the feeling that is coming out of your heart, it's actually a measurable frequency. So when you can say something positive to help affirm yourself, right, your thought is engaged, and then you can bring the feeling into it. Now your heart is engaged. Dr. Joe Dispenza calls this heart and mind coherence. So you are in one with your thoughts and your positive emotion. That literally creates this beautiful energy field around your body, which is measurable and helps you to be more clear-minded, more just magnetic to the things that you want and appreciate the things that you want and be generally in a more positive state of mind. So for those of us struggling with, I don't feel confident, I don't feel like this, you want to reach for an affirmation that you believe, not something that way out there, right? But something you believe, like, you know what, I can handle more than I think. That's a great starting affirmation. You don't have to, I'm a billionaire and I'm like the best person in the world. No, start slow, a nice little baby step, right? I can handle more than I think. And then you turn up the emotions in your heart. What would that feel like to really be able to handle more? Oh, I've done that. I've been there. That feels good. That is how you truly affirm yourself. And then you feel the actual energy of your body changing and the outcomes will change to match that.
Right. Do you have any questions for the good doctor?
I have so many questions for you. First off, we have about 7 minutes left, so
Okay.
there's a few specific situations that I would like to ask you.
Oh,
about.
perfect. Let's
First of all, how do you define self-esteem and why is it important for overall well-being? And is it different from confidence?
Ooh,
Is
okay.
it different from capability?
I love all of this. Okay, so self-esteem, the way I personally define it, is the way we are thinking and feeling about ourselves and our lives. The way that I define it with thinking and feeling is because I feel that we're empowered to change our thoughts and feelings. When you say something like, oh, I was born like this, or, you know, I'm naturally confident, that's great. But if something wavers, you don't know how to fix it because you're like, this was just how I was. Now it's gone. Like, I'm stuck. So I love to put the power in your hands and say self-esteem is the way you think and feel about yourself and your life. And then when it comes to confidence, I like to personally think that confidence is the way you show that self-esteem. So I walk into a room, my shoulders are back, I present myself, that's confidence. But what's happening in my head is self-esteem, because we've seen the girls on the runway walk down that runway like they were so confident, but the self-esteem was not there. So the confidence was more of an act rather than a product of real self-esteem. And I did that myself. That's how I know, because I was backstage like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And they'd be like, go. And I'm like, hello. Right. And then like model face came on and I was out. And I'm like, how did I just do that? And I'm like, well, why don't I just change my mind longer? Why didn't I just wait for the last second? Let me just work on this. So that's how I would define self-esteem and confidence. Yeah.
So how does self-esteem influence our relationship with others, and what can we do to foster healthy connections?
Ooh, okay. I'm giving you a full picture on this one. I want you to imagine yourself as a seed, right? And as a seed, you have to water yourself to grow because you have potential in there. You can't see what it is. It's just a seed, but in there is the potential to become everything. So let's use an example of an apple tree, for example. That seed is you. And when you water, nurture it, pay attention to it, take care of it, it will blossom into this beautiful apple tree. When it is at its most successful, at its most beautiful, fulfilled version, it will sprout apples. Who are those apples for? Others. Yeah. So self-esteem is that process of watering your seed, becoming the fullness and the best that you were meant to become so that then you can feed and help and nurture others. It is not a selfish journey. So I think that that's what the relationship is. When I work on loving me, I have more love in me that I've nurtured and I can now feed the world with that.
Cannot pour from an empty cup, sort of thing.
100%. And I love to not even pour from the full cup. Okay, I want the cup overflowing like a fountain, and I want you guys to get the overflow.
Yes.
I like that.
So how does cultural and societal pressure affect our self-esteem, particularly in the marginalized communities, and how can we address those issues?
Oh, I feel like Miss America with this one. Like, well,
yeah, that was a good one, Brody. Where'd you pull that one from?
Right? I'm like, let me see your notes. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So I feel that society is keeping us away from some really vital information. I think that's the first step. I think we have minimized the value of our imagination. We've minimized the value of energy. Again, once you said energy, you prefaced it earlier by saying, I know it sounds hippie, because like we're now afraid to say it, but it's a fact, right? So we've kind of demonized these words that are truly things that are actually going to help us. We haven't given access to information. A lot of our education right now is about, memorizing and spitting out facts and figures, but we haven't really taken a step back to say, but who are you? Who's the self? What's the power of the self? So I think that part of helping society as a whole and the marginalized communities and everyone really is to start to input more of the tools and the tips and the value on what our minds truly can do and what we can do with, the studies are out there about healing yourself. The studies are out there about, you know what I mean? And they're showing what your body, your cells, they're chemicals that flow from your body based on your thoughts. Why don't our communities know that? If I'm filled with negative thoughts, they're literally matching, quote unquote, negative chemicals, if you will, that are flowing through my body and are causing me to be, as a verb, depressed, right? Just feeling less than myself. So why aren't we educating people that, if you do prioritize trying to get into a better thought space, you're going to physically help yourself on a chemical flow level?
Sure, because your thoughts can lead to stress, and stress will kill you.
100%.
There's that, you don't have to say,
believe
that's
in anything.
woo-woo.
Yeah, exactly.
Science will tell you that,
100%.
and our thoughts, they're just such a slippery slope.
100%. So who's spending time in our communities really sharing that, really drilling that home, talking about meditation, talking about mindset? That's, I think, one of the biggest changes we're going to see. And I don't think it's as big as a shift as we think. I think we just have to have the desire and pour some of the resources in. For sure.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. Can you discuss the connection between self-esteem and mental health, sort of specifically when it comes to anxiety and depression?
Oh, absolutely. So I think there are two separate schools of thoughts on this. Sometimes anxiety and depression really are chemical, right? So it's something you really need to go to psychiatry, psychology. You need to maybe be medicated, just a higher level of care. And I have full respect for that. Other times I do feel that we are overdiagnosing sometimes. And I also, in terms of depression, and other times I think that we just haven't provided enough resources. So I like to use the word options here. When I've run out of options, of course, I'm anxious. That's anybody in any given case for anything. So if we're looking at life and I don't feel like I have options for certain things. So in other words, I'm upset. And the advice someone gives me is give it time. Give it time. Well, I went from upset for one day to upset for 1 week. Now I'm upset for a month. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this time, but it's not working. Okay? It's been a year and I'm angry. So I think that just options, people need options in order to release that sensation of anxiety, because if I know where something is, or I know where to get the help, or I know what to do next, then that naturally is going to reduce a sense of anxiety, right? So I think that one of those big steps is, number one, we're misdiagnosing because we're not providing the tools. So it's like, hey, I'm not going to tell you how to feel better, but I'm going to just tell you you're depressed. I'm sorry, what? Okay, so how about give me some tools, just what we talked about earlier. If I knew that I could go into a meditative state, if I knew I could visualize something different, if I knew affirmations really worked, if I did them right, if I knew I could elevate my emotions and this could help, if I knew that when it didn't work, it was okay because now I could start journaling instead. When I know that journaling didn't work for me, I could do this instead, right? If I have a long list of options, then I can use my time to work through those options rather than being like, I just hit a wall everyone's telling me wait for time or something random, and I don't know what to do now. I'm now anxious, I'm depressed, I'm upset, and I don't see anything better in front of me. And many people define depression as such. When I look ahead, I don't see anything improving from where I am right now.
And I love that you talk about the tools, because I think that patients, people, and even doctors are just tired of writing a prescription or taking a pill. Yes, medication has its place. There's without a doubt, medication has its place. But, more doctors like yourself are coming in with a toolbox and actionable steps so people can try other things that are also scientifically proven and medically backed.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us.
For sure. Thank you for your questions. This is so good.
This is so much fun. It's one of our first official shows.
That's
We're glad
right.
you are our guest. And,
Yes, you were perfect.
and thank
I
you
am
for joining
pumped.
us on Bloom.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Goodbye.